Thank you very much. I hope everyone enjoyed their lunch break. Your challenge now is to remain awake for the next hour and a half. We will do our best to entertain you. You've met me once before already. I'm Wade Ballou, retired legislative counsel from the House of Representatives, and I've been a participant with now Bússola Tech for a few years. For our panel, it is well established that the digital parliament is important to democratic governance. AI can improve the quality of information that's available to Parliament, and the use of AI in Parliament can both improve the legislative process and allow for more transparency, both within and without the Parliament. To do this, it requires structured data and a process to allow for communication with public artificial intelligence interfaces. This panel explores issues relating to these structures and to allow for integration with public AI. And now I will ask each of the panel members to introduce themselves. I'm going to run down through my list. I'll begin on my right and come all the way down. First, Marcos, will you introduce yourself?
Só vou corrigir o nome, Juliano.
Let me just correct. My name is Juliano.
Sou Juliano Bringer.
I'm Juliano Bringer
Da Ágape Consultoria.
from Ágape
Uma
Consultancy,
grata satisfação poder fazer
and I'm
parte da
very
mesa
happy to be a
com-
part of this
já vou
panel
chamar assim amigos.
with
Já
my
nos
friends here.
conhecemos,
I'll
e
refer to you as
estou aqui
friends
para
because we
aprender
already know each other,
e
and
poder colaborar nessa participação
I'm
desse
here
painel.
to collaborate with this panel.
Thank you, and my apologies, Juliano. And I was looking at my list.
Excuse me, can you step in your chair a little bit? You can stand up?
Oh, sure.
Yes. Thank you. So your
Great.
pictures.
I needed to be taller. Fotis, let me now turn to you.
Thank you. Once again, it's wonderful to be being here. I look forward to my participation to this excellent panel. I'm Fotis Fitsilis. Since 20 years in the Hellenic Parliament, I'm a professor at the Universidad Austral in Buenos Aires on parliamentary governance and artificial intelligence. And I run since almost a decade an initiative called the Hellenic OCR team. We do OCR, but we also do various other digitalization and modernization activities together with Bússola Tech and other organizations across the planet. Really great to be here with you. Thank you.
Thank you. And now Grant.
All right. My name is Grant Vergottini. I am the CEO of Xcential. We're a small company in San Diego, California, and we specialize in bill drafting systems. You met me yesterday. I've been doing this for 24 years now. So in that, I'm going to bring some of that insight today. So thank you for the invite.
Thank you. And now, Monica, you ended up at the far end of my left here.
Thank you so much. I'm being professor of legal informatics since 2000. So I'm involved in many projects with the European Parliament and other parliaments. And with Fabio Vitali, we designed a common tool, so one of the standards for legislative and parliamentary documentation. And I'm here to give my contribution to the panel. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So let's move to our first discussion. We're going to focus on the data itself, the metadata and the content in its various multimodalities, text, auditory, and visual, typically known for us as bills, reports, voting reports, transcripts, Hansards, and so forth. This data, to be useful, must be accurate, timely, and trustworthy, which ideally requires capturing the data in real time at its source. These sources are business units of the legislative process, within their unique responsibilities and values that conflict often with this data capture. Some of these conflicts include meeting demands for high volume, such as drafting legislation, the drafting environment itself, maintaining client confidentiality. For example, during the House Legislative Council's transition to XML in the early 2000s, we in the Legislative Council's office resisted manually inserting XML tags and insisted on automatic capturing of textual tags and metadata. Further, we refused to allow the inclusion of identifiers relating to subject matter, the identity of the drafter and the member in order to meet our confidentiality duty. As a result, only some of this information was captured at the source, and it was captured only imperfectly so, or is now captured imperfectly so and at considerable expense downstream from the drafting process. So recognizing the tension between the capture at creation and business unit requirements, my opening questions for my colleagues are, what kinds of information should be included in legislative data? How and where in the process should this information be obtained? And what are the considerations to be taken into account when determining the answers to the first two questions? Just a small starter there. Grant, let me toss that over to you.
All right, thanks, Wade. So I'm going to start by just telling you a quick story. I started in this field 22 years ago. I came from electronic design, and in electronic design, we have very sophisticated models, simulatable models. You can write things in English, and it can simulate that English, very sophisticated capabilities, very complex identifier system. I came to this field and was kind of shocked at how primitive it was. And I saw what I could do could bring a lot of innovation and change to the system. And I took my ideas to the state legislature, and they gave me a contract. And I was very excited. I could see a field that I could innovate in and pioneer. They were already publishing to the web. They had perhaps the very first legislative portal in the world, but they published plain text, not even HTML, it was plain text. I didn't really understand why, but I came to understand why. When I got there, I began designing this big complex information model. And the first thing I did is I defined identifiers for provisions, identifiers for members, identifiers for subjects. And in doing so, I created a huge crisis because that's not what they brought me in to do. They did not want me. I came in believing I was going to build an information model. They believed I was going to build a bill drafting system. And they wanted the capabilities of bill drafting and absolutely nothing else. My job was to replace the capabilities that already existed in the mainframe system that was obsolete with a new system that did exactly what a mainframe could do. I was somewhat devastated, but accepted the challenge and built a system. Some of my identifiers I was able to keep hidden away, but the basic system was built around just one thing, bill drafting. The goal of that bill drafting system was to produce, as Juliano said earlier this morning, one thing, paper documents. The text files that were published to the web, that was an afterthought. The goal was to get very precise paper documentation out. With time, they evolved that a little bit, and they went away from paper documents to PDF files. They did away with those text files, which were actually nice and easy to scrape, and they replaced them with PDF files that made the information even more hard for data scrapers. Because now you had to somehow crack open a PDF file. There were signed PDF files. The information had become less transparent. But a company that was scraping information came to learn that there was XML inside the legislature, and they wanted access to that XML. And the legislature's response was, no way. So that company sued the legislature, and they got forced to make that information available. So it went from, they were only willing to do it when it became an obligation they had to fulfill. There was no sense of innovate. The goal wasn't to look to the future. The goal was to do as little as possible to meet the obligation and nothing more. So they took the XML that we had and all those identifiers that were still in, they stripped them out. Any information that wasn't just plain text and wasn't the raw tags, they stripped it out. And then how did they publish that to the web? Now, if it was me, I would want to publish that in a database that you could query against. You could ask questions of that XML and actually use XML because it was XML. Make it visible. What did they do? They took all the files that they had, put them in a zip file, and occasionally would update a zip file. It meant that anyone that wanted to use that data would have to build their own system to actually interpret the data. They were doing everything they could to meet the obligation and nothing more. Now, if we fast forward to where are they today, the system is still in place. It's been drafting bills for 20 years now. I'm quite proud of that. But the system behind it is meeting obligations and nothing more. So I decided to do some research recently on a bill, a Senate Bill 11, that dealt with deepfakes and criminalizing other types of AI misuse. So I asked Copilot, tell me what you can about Senate Bill 11. It came back with a wonderful synopsis of the bill. It described what the intent was, who the member that had submitted it, the history of it. It gave me lots of information. It even showed me the text. And then it showed that it had been vetoed by the governor, and it gave the reasons the governor had vetoed it. And there were some considerations that he didn't feel it covered. So then I said, give me your sources. Where are you getting this information? And it listed all its sources. And they were all private sources. That legislative portal that we put out wasn't used. Instead, they were getting the information from somewhere else. While the authentic data was sort of online, it was online in a way that was purposefully not useful. And this is a problem that I come across everywhere we go. There's so much information, such rich information we could provide. Identifiers are important. Being able to understand the versioning, the history, all of that information is important, and it needs to be provided in not a static way, but in a way that AI tools can access that information. I say the information needs to be AI ready. Early on, I used to say the information needs to be computer readable. Then I started to say the information needs to be computer processable, more than just readable. But now it needs to be AI ready. And each of these steps mean the obligation needs to change. And if the obligation doesn't change, the legislature falls further and further behind. And that's what I see. Most of the places we work, not a single customer that I have outside of the one sitting next to me has ever brought up AI, ever. It has not yet reached a level of threshold where it's of interest to them. They don't have an obligation to do anything with AI. And I think that's a problem. Thank you.
Thank you, Grant. That customer from 20 years ago, although it wasn't, could have been me, because that's where I began with all of this. Fotis, over to you.
Thank you, Wade. I will try to build upon what has been said by Grant, which is a wonderful foundation. So your first question was what kind of material? Well, I sort of have the answer for my parliament, because we just finished a multi-year European funded project of digitizing parliamentary materials. And let me just read through the list what kind of materials were digitized, right? Newspapers referring to parliamentary proceedings, references in general. Parliamentary archives, that's the standard archives. Codes, and manuscripts included in our library archives, maps, very interesting, audio files from converted to texts, photographs, historical photographs, pages from personal archives of notable individuals, some very notable politicians when they pass away. Many of them, if not all, they give their archives to the Parliament. And we included that in the digitization projects, and so on. So there's literally tons of material in any Parliament's archives, and all of this is useful. Not only text, we're talking here about data is multimodal nowadays. Video, okay, you don't have video from the 1800s, but okay. Text, audio were available. Maps, as said, because the future of technology, I don't even use the word artificial intelligence, it might be called differently. Well, some sort of machine learning will always be there. But we might have, I don't know, some other emerging tech, you name it. They will use data. So it's not about the technology, it's about its usefulness for the administration and for the stakeholders of Parliament, which are among MPs, parliamentarians, administrators, but also civic society. So whatever we do, and the next generation of administrators after us, they need to find the source of information. They need to find the data. And sorry to say this, if we don't cater for this, our generation, some of this data might be forever lost, particularly the old data. You leave them for a few decades more, in the archives, they're useless. Through mold, through humidity, and so on. You can't use them anymore. So that's my basic takeaway for this introductory part. Act now, act swiftly, digitize in sufficient quality so that the next generations have all this information to build upon. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Fotis. In my very early drafting career, I was drafting a lot of legislation in the national park area, a lot of boundary changes or the formation of new parks. And to do the boundary work, we typically referred to a map and how useful it would be to be able to have a link that actually gave you the map with the boundary. So glad to hear you're doing that. Monica, over to you.
Thank you very much, President. So let me say that in the artificial intelligence era, there is a trend nowadays, from my perspective of observation, to apply a datafication of the legislative documentation. What does it mean? To transform the document that is a unit, very complex, in little pieces of data. This is what we are assisting, because data analytics is jumping inside of the Parliament, try to resolve using statistics, graph visualization based on data analytics, many potential problems, like to figure out the future perspective and needs. I think these undubitable add value to extract from the document data, but is not the correct process to do. So we need to, first of all, to maintain the integrity of the document itself, because the parliaments are based on the documents. So there is a long legal tradition based on the document, and document embedded inside culture, legal tradition, process, and a lot of other information hidden in the form of the documents. And when I'm talking about with engineers, they say to me, okay, I use AI to extract the data. And we can forget the document, we have the data, so we have the most important part, and we say no, we need to codify first an XML with a valuable legal knowledge inside coming from the document. The article is an article, the comma in the paragraph and the sublist is a meaning, and you can transform these in simple data for the database. Otherwise, we come back to the 80 with the SQL database. So XML maintain the integrity of the parliamentary action that is summarized at the end in the document. In this document, there is a culture, the tradition, the procedure, everything. The second point is that the documents can be enriched by metadata, right? But metadata are in the different level respect to the official authorial content. The risk in the past was to mix all the levels, metadata, annotation, and content. What happened in the future for the next generations when they will open an XML with a mix of all these levels in only one? How can distinguish the approval text, approved official legal text from the metadata coming from ChatGPT? It is a issue, this. For this reason, some standards like Acomantoso has a pillar to distinguish metadata put on the top of official documents in a different level with authorial metadata, who put this annotation, when, with which purpose, and who signed the responsibility of this metadata. And what is a part voted by the parliament, this is another level. We risk with the ChatGPT and generative AI to put all the levels of the same parts of the bits at the end. And when we open again, we can distinguish which part was voted originally and what was put by the library as an annotation or the professor as a super annotation of jurisprudence. So we need to start today for the next generation of the future to distinguish all this level of information and also to provide to AI application a differentiation of the authoritarianness of these data. So coming from library, coming from the parliament itself, coming from some professors and so. So this, I think, is a very, let me say, methodological approach that the parliament should start now for preparing the future generation of the legal content.
Thank you, Monica. It is ironic that we went from flat information and documents to structured data, and right now AI is flattening it all again. Yeah, it's interesting. Juliano, over to you.
Obrigado, Wade. Eu vou propor, talvez, aqui tudo que foi meio que
I
conversado.
think everything that was talked about the experiences of our friends.
Vamos falar, talvez, em três camadas.
Let's
Uma camada
speak
que
in
todos
3
já
layers.
capturam, que é o texto da
One,
proposição,
which is the text of the
emendas,
proposition,
traduções,
amendments,
transcrições,
reports,
e
transcriptions, videos, and
Uma
audios.
segunda camada,
A second
que
layer,
quase ninguém captura
which
e
almost
também
no
se
one
preocupa,
captures
que
and
pode
or
ser
worries about,
combustível
can be the
para
fuel
IA
for
ou qualquer
AI
outra forma
or for
de
any other way
tecnologia
of
que
technology
possa ser implementada.
that can be
Em que
implemented.
etapa do processo o documento não foi gerado?
In which
Em que
moment
etapa
of
do
the
processo
process
o
was the
documento foi
document
gerado e o que valor
generated,
ele tem?
and what value does it
Essa
have?
seria
I
item
think
da segunda
that would
camada.
be an item
A
of the
relação
second
desse
layer.
documento
The
entre a
relationship with this
proposição,
document
o
between
seu
the
parecer,
proposition,
a emenda, a
its
votação.
report, or the amendments,
Linha do
voting,
tempo desse trâmite.
the
Qual o valor
timeline,
disso
what's the
posteriormente,
value
daqui 10 anos,
after 10
como o
years?
Fotis mesmo falou, daqui 10
Like
anos,
Fotis
quanto
said,
que isso pode
how
gerar de
much can
valor
this generate in
para,
value,
seja para políticas
be it
públicas,
for
seja
public
para a
policies,
construção de
for the
novas
construction
normativas,
of new
novos
norms,
atos, leis,
new laws and to give continuity to society as we know it. So the events of the process, the regiment, the internal regimen, and that orients all of the needs.
As referências normativas e citadas dessa proposição,
of this proposition, of this data, to make it more valued, and the versions of the text over time, so that this can work and can be understood, be it by us, human beings, as well as the AI itself, so it can use these values and create content with value. And the third layer, the legislative intention, which is almost never structured, the justification of the author, why he brought this proposition, which he presented, the public proposition that what they're trying to solve.
Podemos voltar? Por favor,
Podemos.
desculpa.
Sem
Mas
problemas.
você pode avisá-los que mudou a frequência para o 6?
Amigos, a frequência mudou para o 6. Number 6. Yes. Channel 6. Yeah. I'm sorry.
Okay, English channel testing. Can you hear me now? Okay. So,
Estão me ouvindo?
are all the gringos in channel 6?
Sim, não?
Okay, channel 6, can you hear me now? Testing. Fine. 5? Okay, perfect.
Yeah.
Okay, it's 5 then. Okay, perfect. Cheers.
Vamos voltar ao início.
Okay,
Foi só treino.
okay, that was practice. Now back again, guys.
Vamos retornar aqui. Então, a minha proposta para os
So,
amigos
my proposal for my friends to bring 3 layers that can be worked, including to make sense to the legislative process and for Parliament. The first layer is all the most catch or see text of the proposition, amendment, report, the videos, audios, all of this, which the parliaments and the legislative have already made an effort to improve, to generate value. And the second layer would be the context of the process, which almost nobody catches well, the context. And I think which is the important for the technologies, to have an effect for the parliament, for the citizen, and other interested parties, which is the part, the document in the way it was generated, the relationship between this document and the proposals, reports, voting, how was it voted, how was that project voted, and how can this add in value, since this is an acquired context, and how can it be extracted from the document. Then you have the timeline of how it went through Parliament, and even to make sense for the parliamentary, where some propositions go quicker than others for society, some of the processes that each parliament has, regimental dependencies, the rules that are conducting this, normative references that are being mentioned that are part of this context, and the versions of that text over time, everything that was changed, everything that is updated, and something most don't do correctly, and we could propose to do so, because that allows that the machine language, it can be generative AI or quantitative quantum, sorry, and this is the values we give to those data. First layer, second layer, and the third, which is the legislative intention, which almost no one puts as data in the process, the justification of the author, what motivated him, if it was just a political motivation, or was it the society was asking, or maybe his neighborhood, or where are his constituents? What's the public problem that this proposition is trying to solve? The impacts, forecast impacts for that problem, to the point that these expected impacts are real. So when you propose the LOA, which is the budget law, or everything that involves the public budget, which data is being taken into consideration in order to set the data, the quantities in the budget? Maybe that contest, maybe the legislative intention is captured to give value to the parliament, the affected public, and the relationship with previous laws. Does this law bill, maybe it doesn't make sense because there's another law, or maybe I shouldn't? Does it add something that already existed in this legal chain? So I would bring these three layers of possibilities that we could analyze and improve.
Thank you, Juliano. I think if we did number 3, showing the legislative intention, we would expose a lot of members in our Congress who are introducing messaging bills with no intent that they move anywhere, but it sure would help the drafters. You also mentioned the context and the timeline, and that leads right into our next question, which is each successive stage in the legislative process builds on the previous stage so that the data obtained at one stage is used in the next. What can be done to integrate the data interfaces between steps in the legislative process to provide efficiency in the process as well as transparency, both within the parliament itself and to the public? And let me see, I think, Fotis, if I can begin with you.
Well, that's a no-brainer, since Grant and Monica have already touched upon. One, I think the obvious here solution, without reinventing the wheel, is to integrate systems based on standards. And let's say a comma-based or generic XML-based systems, they have tags and annotations where you can capture all this information in each consecutive state, whether this is legislative or any other process. I mean, parliaments not only legislate for oversight. Some scholars say you have new, even more modern facilities or instruments like parliamentary diplomacy and maybe also some educational activities. So all this can be captured within structured data. Indeed, probably the best solution is to use some established standards and not exactly reinventing the wheel. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Agree completely. And as a drafter, I appreciate the reminder that a legislature also does oversight work. Very important. Sometimes, very important. Thank you. Monica, I could turn to you.
Yes, thank you. So for me, interoperability between institutions is a fundamental part of the metadata that we have modeled in a command also, and is a task to achieve and to pursue with a great energy, in my opinion, inside of the parliament. Why? There are, in my vision, 3 reasons why to have this interoperability between institutions and finally for the citizen. First of all, we are talking here to investigate about artificial intelligence, and artificial intelligence, we have understood in these 2 days need a contest. It's a contest-free mostly. And the metadata of the workflow and between institutions provided the context where the document start, the evolution over the time, and also the steps of the procedure. So not only versioning in the text, but versioning of the procedural step state change inside of the debates, democratic debates. So interoperability is not only I pass a document, but I record this change of the status in the process. Is approved, is rejected, and why is rejected. And the second reason is to make transparent the motivation. So we are in the moment that document is not enough. We need to provide to the citizen motivation why the document arrived at hand and which intervention was done on the document and why some party voted in one way and another party in an opposite. In Italy, there is an association called Open Parliament that the goal is to track all the voting, and it's quite nice because it's put in evidence like parties during the campaign promises something, vote the opposite in the law. It's not so trivial to discover this kind of information. So tracking interoperability means also to make transparent the provenance of the output of the legislative process and where come from some decision. And so to make conscious the citizen for the next election. Otherwise, the people are blending and are not access to this internal cuisine of the parliament activity. The third motivation to put attention into interoperability is, in my opinion, also to make evident a problem that we assist in many countries in the relationship between parliament and government competencies. I don't know your situation, but in Italy and many countries in Europe, the government proposed 90% of the bill. And the asymmetry is coming a problem with the AI, because government is indubitable accumulating more data concerning the statistics, the department, the ministries, and we can assist a very divergency between the power that the government will have using AI, because they have more and more data. To make transparent this process in the transfer of the information and the legislative process steps, I think is a countermeasurement to the asymmetry that with AI we tend to make the worst in the future. I'm not optimistic in this because I see that big data accumulation is inside of the ministries mostly. And to make evident these mechanisms, put the citizen in the better position to decide.
Thank you. Juliano, over to you.
Wade, você poderia repetir a pergunta, por favor?
Could you please repeat the question? I think I got a little bit confused. Could you?
So, yeah.
Could you repeat the question?
Yeah. So the question is focusing on each successive stage in the legislative process, which builds on the previous one. And in particular, what can be done to integrate the data interfaces between the steps in the legislative process to provide efficiency in the process as well as transparency, both within the Parliament and to the public.
Muito obrigado, perdão. Acho que o problema não é
The
integrar os
problem
sistemas.
is not to
Acho que o
integrate the
problema é
system,
que cada etapa
is
do
that
processo
each
legislativo,
stage of the
ele ainda
process
funciona como se fosse um
still
mundo
works
isolado,
like an
produzindo
isolated
documentos
world
e não
to
alimentando
producing
de fato
documents and
fluxo
not feeding
contínuo de
a
dados
continuous
que vai
flow of
fazer
data,
sentido.
a flow that
Pontos
would make
fortes
sense.
que podem ser
The strong
elencados,
points,
tudo no projeto gira em
everything in
torno
the project
do parecer,
goes
da sua
around
emenda, da
the
votação, da
report,
transcrição, do vídeo, do
transcription,
despacho,
the
da
video, the
posição.
audio,
Nada é novo.
what was the
Tudo é
official
evento
posture.
relacionado
So
à mesma
these are
coisa
events
que é
related
a
to the
proposição.
same,
Parece pouco
and
simples também, mas
that
muitos
proposition, it
parlamentos
seems
ainda não
simple,
operam
but
assim,
many
não têm
parliaments
esse
do not
hábito.
operate and do not have this habit
Tratar cada ação do
to
processo
deal
como
with
uma
each
agenda de
action
dados, não como
as a
documento.
series
Isso
of
ele não é um
data.
PDF.
So
Ele é uma ação, ele é um evento da etapa da comissão.
it is a
A
part,
votação não é somente basear uma ata,
and
mas é
it's
um
not like
evento também da etapa do
a
plenário.
minute.
A
It's like a
transcrição não
stage. So
somente
the
um
transcription
documento que vai
is
ser
not only a
produzido de forma
document that will
mais
be produced
acelerada,
in an accelerated
e
manner
disponibilizado para a
and made
sociedade,
available
para
to
a acessibilidade
society,
das atas, etc.
and
Mas ele é um
but
evento
it
da
is an
sessão
event from the
relacionado
session
às matérias que
related
foram votadas
to the
naquela
subjects
sessão.
that were voted in that
Quando isso
session.
acontece, o dado já nasce
And when that
integrado à
happens, the
etapa
data is
anterior
born
automaticamente,
integrated
se
to the
nós
previous stage
tratarmos dessa
automatically
forma.
if we deal with it like that.
Então, o sistema precisa
So the
conhecer o
system
regimento,
needs to know the regimen,
integrar entre as etapas, não
integrate
é técnica,
between
ela é regimental, como vem
not
falando,
technical steps, but
regimento, o fluxo de
regiment
tudo.
steps, which is
O
the
fluxo do
focus
processo
of everything that
já está
happens.
definido dentro do
And
regimento,
the
então fica tudo mais fácil,
flow
muito mais
is defined in the
simples
regimen
nesse
itself.
sentido,
So
não de
everything
levar
becomes
o
much
papel,
simpler
mas
in that sense, not
na
in terms of
facilidade de que
technology,
já
but in how
existem
easy it is
aquilo que
to
vai nortear o que nós
identify what
precisamos
guides
ter de dados e
what we
consumir,
need to have in terms of data.
e o sistema legislativo precisa
And the
refletir isso.
legislative system
O
needs to
parecer já
reflect
saiba
this.
a que
The
fase ele pertence, a
decision,
votação
we need
também
to know to
saber
what
qual fase de
phase it
votação, e a
belongs to,
transcrição
and the
se
transcript
refere aos debates.
is
Com
related to the
isso,
debates.
foi o que eu
So
iniciei,
with
não
that,
tem
that's what
a
I
ver
started
talvez só
doing.
com integrar os
It's
sistemas,
not just
mas
about
preparar
integrating
também o
systems,
sistema
but also
para essa finalidade.
having the system be prepared for that purpose.
Thank you. And Grant.
Thanks, Ray. All right. One of the things that I see quite a bit is systems being developed in very disjoint ways. I'm a big proponent of agile development. I don't like big monolithic systems. I believe that everything should be loosely coupled. But one of the drawbacks I see is that things are all built separately to different standards in different ways without much consideration of how they will work together. As Fotis was saying, the key to solving that is that there be a uniform standard. I'm a huge proponent of standards, along with Monica beside me, and we believe that that creates the foundation for a system. But it goes beyond having a roadmap. The roadmap sometimes gets disorganized because of political forces require things to be done at different times and in the wrong order. What really needs to happen is you need to have an information architecture that you're building to. And even if you do build the pieces in the wrong order, you're building them to the same basic standard. And that's one of the things that I would like to see change, is just a better sense, and I'll talk about this a little later as well, of what the architecture of the system is going to be and how that is going to feed all the needs we have for it.
Thank you. And as we move into our next question, I want to pick up on a point that Monica said, particularly relating to the asymmetry of the data. Because the question we just discussed, the reverse question also applies, is what can be done to make public data, and I would include in that data from the government, in many cases, but public data such as national, socioeconomic, and political data, more easily available in the legislative process to allow for impact analysis of the proposed changes to law to inform each stage of the process. And for that, Monica, if we could begin with you.
Thank you. So I think the problem is very large, is called impact assessment in general. I have a project with the European Commission on the impact assessment now, and GRC. It's a large topic because impact analysis, impact assessment are mostly divided in four kinds. We are very familiar with ex ante, so normative, financial, sociological, and coexistence with the surreal level. This is a simple, let me say, not simple, but we are familiar with. Artificial intelligence opens the door to simulation. Simulation means to have a easier way, not easy, but easier way, the possibility to test with the data coming from the reality, what if analysis. What if I modify the taxation percentage in the sector of industry, this one, what happened? Sometimes this kind of simulation is made with traditional tools, but nowadays having this big data, we can produce a very high quality of simulation using artificial intelligence. In industry, simulation is adopted for a while because we have very good tools in this direction. Why not to introduce experimentation inside of a parliament? The third kind of impact assessment is ex post analysis. After 5 years to understand if the factor that we have in mind with the legislation are achieved or not, and what is the output. The outcome should be detected using statistical official data coming from open data portals, but it's not enough. We need a strategy to collect evidence-based data linked with the legislation. And the fourth level of assessment is to imagine future perspective of monitoring of the legislation based on the statistical data. So I have statistical data. I understood that the legislation produces some dystopic effect and not planned. How to put countermeasurement. So what is necessary to implement these four so-called impact assessment? I believe that we need, first of all, a clear plan of indicators, key indicators linked to the legislation. There is not only one roadmap, each country needed to develop internally. Key indicators is fundamental to track the real data and to reverse this information inside of a parliament to the decision system, to the people, the legislators, the lawmaking process. And key indicators are not key indicators like industry, are in the light of a democracy. So this is a real challenge to do. The second point is to create ontologies of the data, because open data is not enough. We need a semantics to associate to this data, especially to interpret the data, the moment of collection, the time of collection you produce, how the data are produced. And this is a big roadmap inside of a country, not only one institution, not only the parliament. All the parties and the government should contribute to create this kind of ontologies. And finally, also the ontologies, it is necessary to have a monitoring staff, monitoring task force to monitor the legislation in the light of the indicators. So I have an indicators, I create the data, I connect the data to indicators, I measure, and the culture of the benchmarking and the measurement is a part of this picture. It's not easy. It's not easy because new competencies should be installed inside of multiple level of the governance.
Thank you, Monica. Now, Juliano, over to you.
Obrigado.
Thank you.
O processo legislativo
The
hoje,
legislative
então, ele é
process
muito rico em
is
texto
currently
normativo,
very rich
mas
in
pobre
normative
nesse
texts,
contexto dessa
but
realidade,
it's
a qual também a Mônica
lacking
trouxe.
in this context and in this
Como
reality
ela
that
mesma falou, é
Monica
grande
brought forth.
desafio.
And like she said, it's a huge
Como
challenge.
que nós
How can
podemos,
we
de fato, e
actually
efetivamente, trazer esses dados que são públicos, são abertos.
bring this public data, this
No
open
caso do
data?
Brasil, possui
In the
IBGE,
case of Brazil, we have the IBGE, the statistical agency that does analysis that can add value to the proposals. But when there are errors in that data and when past proposals were built based on that data, what happens then? This is something we should be attentive to because we know that data is public. And we also have indicators, but because of human error, the publishing of that data can also reflect something which is not the reality, which is not part of the context in which the proposals and the political justifications were considered. So currently, the legislative process keeps good track of the history of laws, but it doesn't keep good track of the context or the reality that created these laws. And it's very important for us to have this possibility of integration, but it's also a huge challenge to have reliable data on this.
Thank you. Thank you. Grant?
That's right. Monica brought up the subject of simulation. As I've said on a few occasions now, if there's anything in this world I know something about, it's simulation. I did it for many years. And I can see applications we could build. For a while, I was a product manager for a product called a decision support system. And that system was built to allow people to define a system in a simple way, using like a spreadsheet paradigm, and then they could do what-if analysis against the data that could be fed into that. I can see how we could do this, how we could bring this capability to this field. But at the same time, I own a small company, Xcential. I look at the capabilities we could come to bring to bear. But at the same time, I worry, if we were to do that, would we have our own Air Canada moment? What are the risks of bringing that sort of information? What if analysis that might influence policy decisions? If we were a private company providing capabilities, what would our liability be? And this is something that we have to wrestle with. People do come to us all the time, not so much in legislative drafting, but people who are doing impact analysis in the agencies, lobbyists, other special interests. They're all interested in what we can do and what capabilities we can bring to bear to integrate that information together. But at this point, it's something that we shy away from.
You are raining on my vision here that I
Você
mentioned
está
earlier.
acabando com o meu sonho aqui?
Fotis, over to you.
Fotis?
I won't try to
Eu vou
say something
tentar falar uma coisa
entirely
aqui
different
que é
from
bem
what my colleagues
diferente
have
do que
said.
os meus colegas
I
disseram.
also think
Eu também acho
the
que
direct and frankly correct answer to
a
this
resposta
question
direta e correta para essa pergunta é, novamente,
existence of
a existência de padrões de dados.
Europe,
E
as Ludovic said earlier,
a Europa, como foi dito,
mandatory interoperability of systems, which at some point gets down to the interoperability. Okay, it's about protocols, but it's also about data. So unless governments and private institutions can agree on some sort of data structures, and there are standards for this, it will be very difficult for future systems to talk to each other or even rely on prior information. You know, when I'm confronted with this kind of questions, I always reply like this. In whatever new legislation comes forth or whatever new technology, usually you draw a line and you say, from now on, we will do this or that. What about the past? And the past is very useful for many reasons. I mean, we are talking here about legislation, and legislation is always in the past, it's not in the future. So you need somehow data structures able to capture this information so that the future systems can make use of it. And we know very well that these systems are as good as the data we can feed them. It's the old IT principle, garbage in, garbage out. If you feed them rubbish, what do you expect that will give it to you? AI, of course, is no exception to this, unless we have authorities that produce and store data according to specific principles, and there are open data principles out there. We won't be able to facilitate what Monica has said, this kind of simulation. Simulations rely on data. If you don't have data, what are you expecting this simulation to provide? And I will say a short anecdote here. I was just a couple of years in a former socialist country. And well, you can say a lot about this kind of countries. You cannot blame them for not keeping records of everything. And they kept this tradition in the more democratic present and hopefully future. And I said, of course we have data for everything. Here, what do you want? Open data. Open data in Europe, what we can dream of. So maybe, okay, I'm not saying that I'm not proponent of a totalitarian control, right? Okay, but in some occasions, specific data subject to parliamentary oversight, of course, but this has to be done under political supervision and parliamentary supervision, needs to be captured according to rules and provisions. Thank you.
Thank you, Fotis. I won't go there, but I'll just raise the question of political systems fail and political oversight fails. So another thing yet to think about is what happens in that case. The topic that we've addressed is very broad. And let's see, have I missed somebody? Yeah, I got it. Yeah, he's already spoken. Yeah. Thank you though. The topic that we've addressed is a broad one, and there's so many directions that we can go, and we have such expertise here on this panel that I want to give each of them time really to add their additional thoughts in whatever direction you all would like to go that would help all of us think about these issues for the future. And to do that, Juliano, I'd like to begin with you.
Deixaria talvez três
Perhaps I would leave you with 3 practical recommendations for any parliament that wants to become prepared for this interaction between public AI interfaces and the legislative process. First, deal with legislative data as the main product of the process, not as documents. Perhaps we could say this today, and many houses are advanced in this process, but others are incipient. And it makes sense to think about this, be it in the legacy of information or in beginning this work. This would be one of the recommendations. And the second recommendation is model legislative processes as a continuous flow of events and not as administrative stages that are independent. Think about the opinions, the votes, the speeches as things that make sense to create efficiency eternally, to eliminate rework and bring real transparency. And lastly, we should connect the legislative process to reality through structured public data. Laws are made to transform reality, but the legislative process is very much disconnected from the data that describes this reality. When the proposal is born with a context indicated by public indicators, this opens a powerful path for impact analysis to give transparency and for the responsible use of AI as well. And then, well, these are my 3 points that I observe would be important for this integration. This integration with public AI interfaces would then no longer be a challenge, but become a natural consequence in the way the Parliament organizes its information. That's my contribution.
Thank you very much. I am going to go out of the order that I initially let the panel know about, so that I can accommodate my friend and colleague Fotis. So Fotis, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you very much also for this rapid switch. It's not easy to provide recommendations for anything. This you already know. Also, given to the fact that if we talk, and we are talking about parliamentary institutions, these are they're no two that are alike. So that you might be able to group them in categories, but generally it's one has to be very careful when providing recommendations. So if I'm to say anything here, is along the lines I followed earlier, that since we what is the one that we have to maintain? So we have to follow, maybe to start from the opposite side. So we need to maintain first the integrity of the institution. We need to maintain public trust, which again means that we essentially we need to maintain democratic processes. And since this can only be guaranteed if we are able to have this standard. I mean, this is not new. We have to maintain the standard democratic principles. So accountability, representability, and so on. So the one way to do that, and transparency, of course. One way to do this is, as said, use standards. Standards apply to data, but standards apply also to processes. Standards apply to all types of parliamentary procedures. These standards do not fall from the sky. These standards cannot be applied by themselves. People and parliamentary officials have to choose what to apply, what applies in each occasion. Some parliaments need to have a head start. Some others need to find a starting point. Interparliamentary cooperation here is key. So use standards first. Collaborate and cooperate second. I mean, you can distinct here what is first, what is second. So probably this is all on the same level. Whatever I learned, and probably my colleagues, it's because we have seen somebody applying it, or we have read something about it, which again somebody else has written. So this is not wisdom that simply came out of our head. This is not nuclear science. This is not something out of this world. This is not science fiction. This is pure practice. And okay, I give that to Parliament. It's very hard to apply trial and error here. Politically, you cannot do many errors before you're taken politically out. So since this seems to be a valid, let's say, principle, I would urge, instead of making many errors, try to learn from good and bad practice, and then try to develop some sort of strategy. This would be my third, let's say, recommendation. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Fotis. Now, Grant.
Thanks, Ray. If there's anything I've learned about the legislative field is that it's based on tradition, oftentimes ancient traditions. And most of the people that I work with have had that drilled into them. They've been told that the traditions are the way they are, whether they make sense or not, and they are also not changeable. They're immutable. Most of the people that I work with have been given a task to work with us, but they haven't been empowered to make change. Almost inevitably, there's no vision for the organization. Instead, they have a task to do, and they're going to fulfill that task. And that task means changing as little as possible to get a capability that they maybe already have. They just need to update or modernize. There needs to be, I've talked about a roadmap. There needs to be a roadmap. There needs to be an architecture. But above that all, there needs to be a vision. And that vision needs to be set at a high enough level that people respect it, appreciate it, and believe that they are fulfilling that vision and that they are empowered to do the things necessary to achieve that vision. Because without that, we just go back to building the systems we already have and not meeting any future obligations. We look to the past for what we need to do rather than look to the future. And I think that's the biggest recommendation I would have is make sure there's a vision, make sure that vision is held at a high enough level, that vision is constant, and that the people that have to implement that vision all feel empowered to do whatever it takes to make that vision come to fruition. Thank you.
Thank you, Grant. And the honor of the last observations, Monica, is yours.
Thank you so much. So digitalization in the Parliament is not enough. It's only the first very beginning step. It's not a news, but the news is also that standard alone is nothing. We need, first of all, a methodology and the principle how to apply the standard. Accommentosa is a standard very large for everyone's legal tradition, but the most important output that we can give you is that, first of all, it is important to take a standard and to create a specification for the legal tradition. This was made by the European institution with the initiative AKN for EU. All the institution with the task force decided how to share the use of the same standard. So when I annotate with the tag, the meaning of this tag is unique inside of the institution, from the Parliament to the Council to the Commission. If I have a tag, but my meaning of the tag is different from you, the standard failed. Also, UN did the same with an initiative called AKN for EU. I'm working with the three big agencies of the UN, WHO, FIO, EIU, and they have in common the same meaning how to use the standard. Otherwise, the interoperability and semantic meaning interpretation is different. Curation of the data is obviously an important also recommendation. But I wanted to stress also the point, not all the curation, but completeness, because in the era of LLM, that is based on the language or multimedia, the silence is a crime, because silence is not captured by an LLM. The silence inside of democracy is a signal, is something. For the LLM, the silence of a phenomena is very difficult to put in evidence, because without language expression, the LLM are not capable to apply the model of probabilistic and statistic. So the completeness nowadays is another big point, because otherwise we are training AI with a partial story, and this is not very democratic. And another important outcome of my project is that sometimes it's necessary to change the regulation of the assembly. And also sometimes also the legal tradition is very difficult, I know, but I give an example. Some parliaments, the Chamber of Deputies, are now changing the modality to accept amendment only in digital way. And, or for instance, Albania Parliament are now approaching to change the unique numbering of the bill in order to have a unique URI. And so to have a good application of the digitalization, because without a unique naming convention, it's not possible to make references and the interconnection. So these kind of little and big modification of the regulation of the assembly are necessary to enter in the digital era and mostly in the AI. Ontology, I said already, and the strategy for impact assessment is necessary. But all these points are in common human, and it is important to invest in the building competencies, capacity building, and human skills to be able to manage this kind of transformation with a strong commitment coming from all the people involved in this process. Thank you.
Thank you, Monica. My big takeaway from all of this is a non-technical one, but it is that all of us, each of us engaged in this process from our various levels of responsibilities, have an obligation, have the responsibility, and have the duty to engage well for the welfare of our democracies, both today and in the future. And the issues that were raised, the discussion that was had here, I think is a very important guide toward that. And I want to thank each of the members of our panel and wish you the best in your travels. So thank you very much.